was a deal that took weeks and weeks of hard work across the administration. We think it's a significant step in the right direction.
This was a cost that Israel was prepared to pay because the human benefit of reuniting people with their families, especially women and children, was so profound and compelling.
Donald Trump would be a lame duck leader on day one. You need to have a candidate that can surround themselves with the best and brightest people. Nobody is going to want to work for Donald Trump.
More breaking news. Some hostages held by Hamas will soon be freed under a deal approved by the Israeli government. At least 50 women and children hostages could be released during a 4-day ceasefire. Israel will also free at least 150 Palestinian women and children held in detention centers. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said today the deal was the right decision. In a statement, President Biden wrote, quote, "I appreciate the commitment the Prime Minister Netanyahu and his government have made in supporting an extended pause to ensure this deal can be fully carried out." For more on this, Christina Ruffini and Willie James Inman join us. Christina is CBS News correspondent. Willie, CBS News White House reporter. Christina, let's begin with you. There's been some developments in the last few moments. Bring us up to speed with what you got.
Right. Well, we initially were told this deal was going to start moving forward tomorrow, but now there seems to have been a delay. Reuters is reporting, this is coming from Israel's national security advisor, saying negotiations for the release of our captives are progressing and continue at this time, but the release will not be before Friday. And as we were sitting here, I recently got a statement from the Israelis that says the same thing. The start of the release will take place according to the original agreement. So that means they're going to follow what they worked out. But now instead of starting tomorrow, it says it's not going to start before Friday. Now, obviously, this is just happening, so we're not exactly sure why. But it doesn't say that the deal has fallen apart, only that it's getting delayed one day. So hopefully that means it'll still go forward just a little bit later.
But this is a delicate thing, and it has been from the start. A shift in the timetable could indicate it's even more fragile.
It's not good. And look, as we were waiting for this deal to be reached last night, we were all refreshing and watching our phones because we were told it was getting down to small details. One of the sticking points was the start time when this would all begin, because what they've agreed to is a 4-day ceasefire. Now, the original negotiations, these negotiations have been going on for about 7 weeks. The original negotiation was for pauses, humanitarian pauses. There would be a period of 3, 4, 5 hours where Israel would agree to stop the fighting so these exchanges could occur. This is different. This is due to the pressure coming from the White House in part. Israel agreed to full stops. There's a ceasefire for these 4 days. Each day, they will release a set amount of hostages. The Israelis, in turn, will release Palestinian, mostly women and children. These are going to be mostly women and children hostages coming from the Hamas side as well. And each day, if that happens and that goes well, the deal can be extended for another day and another day. So it gives a benefit for Hamas to continue releasing hostages if Israel will hold to the ceasefire. But it's so delicate. These negotiations have been incredibly complex. And as you mentioned, nothing is agreed to until everything is agreed to. So the fact that it's being delayed does raise some flags, and I'm going to have to make some calls after I get out of this desk.
Let's bring in Willie on this now. Willie, what role has the president, the White House played in all this, and what have they been saying about it?
Hey there, Scott. Well, White House officials will tell you that the president has been working the phones on this particular issue just today. He spoke with the leaders of Egypt, Qatar, and Israel as well. Speaking with Prime Minister Netanyahu just hours ago, we got those notices from the White House saying that the president completed these calls. And this is, in fact, all surrounding this hostage negotiation deal that Christina perfectly mentioned that has now been delayed. So certainly there are questions as to why the delay and why, in fact, this, in fact, is not moving forward like tomorrow. We did hear from National Security spokesperson John Kirby, who essentially said that this is moving forward in the next 24 hours. And he told Natalie Brand that not only is this a major deal that these hostages be released, but that the White House is working on getting more hostages released as the days go on.
Let's get our bearings. What's the president's public schedule? He's obviously in Massachusetts. You're in Massachusetts. Are we going to have some opportunities to hear from him, perhaps through the course of this waiting period now for the process to begin?
Yeah, well, we did see that statement, as you mentioned, from the president last night. We did not see the president today. He didn't have anything on his public schedule, and they, of course, have called a lid, what's called a lid here at the press. That means that we won't see the president any longer. We do expect the president to perhaps get out and about as he typically does during the Thanksgiving holiday. But as of now, there are no public events on his schedule. But of course, we'll be watching and waiting if he makes any type of statement. We did know via a senior administration official that the president was going to make some type of statement after this deal went through, whether that was a paper statement or whether that was a statement before the press. Of course, turned out to be a statement that the White House sent out to members of the press. But we anticipate perhaps some type of interaction with the media here. We typically follow him around. As you know, Scott, Christina knows this as well. So we perhaps will be watching and waiting as to when the president will speak to members of the press as we wait and see what happens with this negotiation and why the delay with the release of these hostages.
Christina, very quickly, what questions are you asking right now?
I'm asking if this is really going to happen right now. Yeah. And we're going to have to see, one of the big questions is when are these hostages are going to be released that include, young children going to be able to be reunited with their families. And at this point, we're not sure. Hopefully this will start happening on Friday, but we're going to have to wait and see if this deal can hold together and what the delay caused in the first place.
Get back to it. Christina Ruffini, Willie James Inman, thank you both for your time. We're monitoring a deadly vehicle explosion at the Rainbow Bridge, a U.S.-Canadian border crossing near Niagara Falls, New York. 2 people have died in the incident, and the bridge will remain closed while law enforcement investigates what happened. New York Governor Kathy Hochul said the driver was a local individual.
I want to be very, very clear to Americans and New Yorkers. At this time, there is no indication of a terrorist attack. Let me repeat that. At this time, there is no indication of a terrorist-involved attack here at the Rainbow Bridge in Western New York.
A high-profile evangelical leader in Iowa is backing a candidate not named Donald Trump. He joins us next to share who he thinks has what it takes to defeat the former president. You're streaming America Decides.
Ron is focused. He is principled. He is results-driven. And in short, what I love most about Ron is he gets things done.
Earlier this month, Ron DeSantis received the endorsement of Iowa's Republican Governor Kim Reynolds. Now he has the backing from a prominent evangelical leader known as a kingmaker in the state. Iowa evangelical leader and president and CEO of the conservative group, The Family Leader, Bob Vanderplaats, joins us now. We appreciate you joining us on the eve of a holiday, Bob. Happy Thanksgiving in advance. But let me ask you right away the big question. What motivated this endorsement? DeSantis has said Donald Trump can't win a general election. Do you think Donald Trump can't win a general election?
I believe he's our highest risk of winning a general election. So what motivated the endorsement is we've had a front row seat to this for now well over a year. Governor DeSantis has had my attention right away because he won in Florida, a toss-up state, and won it big and won in demographics that we rarely win in. And he's been a bold and courageous leader, basically modeling what Governor Reynolds here in Iowa has done. And so he's really, I've warmed up to him for a long time, but then at our Thanksgiving family forum, there's about a 3 to 5 minute clip where he really laid out the reason for his candidacy and for his support. And it sealed the deal for me, so I thought, why wait? Let's go in before Thanksgiving and make the endorsement.
One of the things the former president has said in so many words on social media is that your endorsement is because Governor DeSantis donated that money to your organization, nearly $100,000. How have you been responding to that criticism?
Well, first of all, I find it somewhat laughable that the one guy that would like to buy my endorsements now accusing of my endorsement being for sale. Governor DeSantis, Vivek Ramaswamy, Tim Scott, all of them participate in, say, promotion in booklets or access to dinners at our events, those type of things. The IRS, Scott, is very clear. We cannot give that to them. They have to buy that. So they did that. But that in no way influenced my endorsement decision. Governor DeSantis earned this endorsement. He didn't buy it.
We look back at the 3 endorsements you've made in 2008, 2012, 2016, all successful. Mike Huckabee, Rick Santorum, and Ted Cruz all won. In this case, you're not endorsing somebody who's likely to win. You're endorsing somebody who's likely not to win. How do you change that dynamic?
Well, first of all, Scott, every one of those that you just mentioned, Governor Huckabee wasn't supposed to win either. He's supposed to get crushed by Mitt Romney. Rick Santorum, nobody thought he could win. He should have been crushed as well. And then Ted Cruz was supposed to get crushed by Donald Trump. All 3 went on to win. I'm taking a look at the dynamics in the state of Iowa. I think it's tailor-made to deliver for Ron DeSantis on caucus night, January 15. I look at the historic endorsement of Governor Reynolds, her putting her thumb on the scale. I think a lot of Iowans are seeing what America is soon to see. This is the most important election of our lifetime, 2024. We need to find a candidate who can win and lead on day one, be a bold and courageous leader. Donald Trump would be a lame duck leader on day one. You need to have a candidate that can surround themselves with the best and brightest people. Nobody is going to want to work for Donald Trump. They've all been sued into oblivion. He doesn't have their back when they get sued. So therefore, you need a two-term governor who has a bold and courageous spirit, who can win a general election, and we believe that's Ron DeSantis.
Your endorsement notwithstanding, Bob, what are we to make of the polling that indicates strong evangelical support in Iowa for Trump?
Well, first of all, I think they know the president, and they probably like what he did. But now I think they're seeing that's going to be time to turn the page. In Iowa, the poll number I saw, Scott, was like at 43%. That's a former president in a Republican caucus. That's not a good number for him, and I believe that's his high watermark. If he gets down to 35, 37%, I think it's very doable that Ron DeSantis can beat him on January 15.
Let me ask the broader question, Bob. As somebody who's endorsing and somebody who's heard from the candidates, what do you think happens if Trump takes office again in January 2025?
Well, one is I think he's just going to be under constant indictment, under a constant cloud. I believe he'll continue to have a vindictive spirit. His whole campaign has been about a vindictive spirit. And now even going after a very popular governor, Governor Kim Reynolds. The two governors that have delivered for this country, what was supposed to be the red wave in 2022, was Ron DeSantis and Kim Reynolds. Both of them he is relentlessly attacking just because they don't support him. They want to give America a choice. And I think not only will he have a lame duck status, not only won't he be able to surround himself with the best and the brightest people, but I think it's going to be a constant cloud of indictment. I think our country needs to move on. We need to turn the page with the next generation leader.
Would you back him if he won the nomination over DeSantis at the end of the day?
Yeah, that's a question that we need to discuss then, because there is so much that's fluid right now. My focus right now is getting Ron DeSantis over the finish line in the state of Iowa so we can present America a choice and then allow America to make that choice.
Bob Vanderplatz from Iowa. We really appreciate you giving time to us today. Have a great holiday.
Yeah, you too. Happy Thanksgiving.
More and more lawmakers are calling for the expulsion of Republican Congressman George Santos of New York. We'll discuss the arguments against the freshman representative and who could fill his seat next year. You're streaming America Decides. GOP candidates are raking in new endorsements before the Thanksgiving holiday. But instead of preparing turkey and side dishes, several are preparing speeches and campaign promises as they hit the trail ahead of the Iowa caucuses. Natalie Allison and Marcia Kramer join us now. Natalie is Politico national reporter, and Marcia is chief political correspondent for WCBS in New York. So we have a brief breather for the candidates and for Congress before the action resumes this weekend and into Monday. Natalie, let's start with that. We just heard from Bob Vanderplatz about his endorsement of Ron DeSantis. From your reporting, how much of an issue has abortion been in the jockeying for the candidates, the caucuses, and the primaries?
You know, it's been an issue to the extent that people like Bob Vanderplatz, that groups, anti-abortion groups like the Susan B. Anthony, Pro-Life for America, have been trying to force the Republicans' hands on this. They've been trying to get them to embrace things like a 15-week ban. The polling shows, though, that candidates' positions on these issues, particularly candidates who are moving to the right, embracing those bans, it hasn't necessarily helped them in places like Iowa. So Bob Vanderplatz is endorsing DeSantis at a really critical time where he is really struggling to take off in Iowa, despite going all in on that state. But DeSantis embracing a 15-week ban, Mike Pence having embraced that, Tim Scott having embraced that, it didn't help them there. And so that's showing us that these, in many cases, very conservative, sometimes evangelical Christian Iowa caucus goers are not moving because someone is sticking to the far right on an issue like abortion. And someone like Donald Trump, someone like Nikki Haley, both of those are continuing to do well in Iowa, particularly Haley, who's seen quite an increase, have said that they're not necessarily going to call for that kind of a federal restriction when they're president.
Can you get a measure of the impact of endorsements in this cycle? It just doesn't feel like a traditional cycle, which means the endorsements may not have a traditional impact.
Yeah, we're not seeing a lot of endorsements except for Donald Trump. Donald Trump certainly is raking them in on the congressional side. He is having a number of people, think like former presidential candidate Ben Carson weighing in to endorse him. But for the most part, these other candidates are not having a lot of public figures, former candidates, other public officials weigh in to endorse them. And I don't think that endorsements are going to maybe be as important this time around. It was very key for someone like Trump in 2016 to get over the finish line with Republicans in the primary process, to get some of the buy-in of conservative evangelical leaders and things like that at a time when they were really struggling on whether to trust him. But now that this primary is so lopsided and Trump is so far ahead, it's not clear that it's worth a lot of these prominent Republicans to go out on a limb and endorse someone who may not survive past the Iowa caucuses. And on top of that, I think it's just really hard to change people's minds at this point in time. And so I don't think we're seeing as many endorsements. Certainly Bob Vander Plaats, Iowa Governor Kim Reynolds, both of whom are sticking their necks out for DeSantis, are going to hope that their endorsement carries a lot of weight. But we don't have the polling yet to show whether that is going to make an effect.
It was noteworthy to us, Natalie, that today 3 more House Republicans endorsed Trump, one from Kansas, one from Indiana, and one from Georgia. So speaking of Congress, Marcia, about the candidate who's not running in 2024 anymore, George Santos. There is an expulsion resolution on the table. The sponsor of that resolution told me today that there's not going to be an update today, but there could be some movement next week. He's no longer going to be in Congress come 2025. Marcia, what do we make of that seat and the prospects of Democrats and Republicans fighting it out there on Long Island?
Well, I think that really what we're waiting to see, he said that he's going to have a press conference on November 30th. So we're waiting to see what he says. And I think that what may be going on is he may be trying to leverage a decision possibly to resign from Congress and eliminate the whole expulsion thing in exchange for some deal he's trying to cut with the federal government and the charges that have been brought against him. So I guess really the hanging chad here in the race is what he's going to do on November 3rd. And if he doesn't resign, obviously that's going to force the hand, especially of the Republicans the newly freshman Republicans in New York, to try to push for him to be expelled.
So that may be a component of his attorneys and his conversations with the Department of Justice, his resigning or not resigning, his facing expulsion or preempting that with a resignation?
Well, I think that you have a situation where he's now reached a point where it's clear that there's more than just a handful of people who think he should resign in Congress. It's now beyond just the New York delegation, and it's gone to people who are on the Ethics Committee and others. So the real question is going to be whether there are enough Republicans who will join with Democrats to vote for expulsion. Remember, as we both know, it takes a 2/3 majority, so that's a high bar. But I think that now that all the things have come out about the investigation that Congress has done, the things he spent money on, from Hermes scarves and getting Botox, to things that were really troubling to congressmen. And I think that maybe he's now looking at the handwriting on the wall, seeing that he could face expulsion and trying to leverage as much as possible an attempt to leverage his ability to resign and to limit the exposure he could have in the federal government and maybe limit his exposure to jail time. Maybe he's looking for a plea deal. Maybe he's looking for a promise he won't have to do jail time. It remains to be seen. But again, the 30th of November, he scheduled a press conference. So whatever negotiations he's doing, he has to do quickly. Remember, a number of people who worked in his campaign have now turned state's evidence against him and are cooperating with the federal government. So that's another thing he has to consider as he figures out what's next for him and whether that next is trying to hold on to serve until at least he goes to trial, which is not until next September.
One of the things he's had going for him is that he's part of that narrow majority, one of just a handful of votes that can make or break anything. If he's gone via expulsion or resignation, that margin gets narrower. There's an Ohio congressman the Republicans have thinking of leaving for a job at a university. The margin gets narrower. So the question is, Marcia, if this goes vacant, this seat for George Santos, and there's a special election called by Governor Hochul, Republicans stand a chance of winning that seat still, in that district still?
It's interesting that you asked me the question, because when the original 5 Democrats sent the letter and called for an immediate vote on his expulsion, they did so because they had talked to the Nassau County Republican chairman, Mr. Cairo, and had his blessing, not even a wink wink, a blessing, saying go for it, go for the expulsion, because they've taken a look at the district, which was redrawn, and think that if they run in this district, that they have a better than even chance of taking the seat. They actually would rather have a special election, because hanging in the balance was a request by the Democrats to redistrict to redraw all the congressional lines. If the State Court of Appeals upholds that, it's clear that the Democrats are going to try to redraw that district that was held previously by Tom Suozzi. Now, Tom Suozzi, the former congressman, is looking like he could be the Democratic nominee if there was a new district drawn. I mean, if there was a special election. But the problem is that the district he won on is not the district that George Santos represents. There were a number of places in Long Island, that Republican areas, that were brought into the district, as well as a very conservative part of Queens, which is now in the district. So the Republicans have taken a look at this, and they say they would rather run in a special election now, because they think they have a better chance of holding the seat now than if it's redrawn, and it's redrawn to the Democrats' liking. So I think that the Republicans in Congress have also gotten that same wink wink from Nassau County Republicans saying, go for it now, go for the expulsion now, if that's what you need to do.
Two different scenarios where candidates and campaigns are intersecting with federal courts. The presidential campaign Natalie's covering, and George Santos, which Marcia is covering. Natalie Allison, Marcia Kramer, have great holidays. Thank you both.
From Dallas, Texas, the flash, apparently official, President Kennedy died at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time, 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, some 38 minutes ago.
That was an emotional CBS Evening News anchor Walter Cronkite. 60 years ago today, breaking the news, America's 35th president had been assassinated. John F. Kennedy, along with his wife Jackie, were in Dallas when the shots rang out in Dealey Plaza there. He was rushed to nearby Parkland Hospital, where he passed away. Authorities identified Lee Harvey Oswald as the lone gunman behind his assassination. JFK was 46 years old 60 years ago today. That does it for today. Thank you for watching America Decides. We're back next Monday at 5 p.m. Eastern. In the meantime, have a great Thanksgiving. You're streaming CBS News.